All right, I want to welcome on a very special guest, host of After Further Review on ESPN Baton Rouge and the Locked On LSU podcast, my good friend, Matt Moscona. Matt, how are we doing?
No, I'm good, man. How are you?
Great, man. I figured I'd bring you in, talk some LSU baseball today, since you are the LSU expert. Um, Figured we can kind of get into it. It's been a roller coaster of a season so far, and I wanted to know, what is your one biggest takeaway so far? What have you learned the most about this team?
I think they are what we thought they were in a lot of ways coming into this year. We thought they'd have great frontline pitching and they'd struggle offensively since Cade Veloso really was the only guy who had proven that he could hit SEC pitching consistently. And they struggled offensively and they pitched it pretty well and didn't have much to show for it. So that's my big takeaway is that they basically are what we thought they were going to be. Some other things sort of at a more micro level, Dylan Cruz is sensational. I mean, we always hear names of these guys when they show up on campus and they're supposed to be, exceptional. And he's as good a freshman hitter as I've ever seen at LSU. I mean, Todd Walker's probably the best, but I was a kid when Todd Walker played. But it's certainly as far as freshman hitters that I've covered, Dylan Cruz is the best.
Yeah, he just has this weird advanced approach at the plate. Outside of Juan Soto, I haven't seen an 18-year-old have this type of approach at the plate.
It's definitely the approach. The other thing that's so impressive is the power of the opposite field. So,
yes.
Power generally for hitters, power is always the last thing to come. And for him to have it already and have it, I mean, kid hit a 420-foot opposite field home run this year. I mean, it's just there aren't dudes in Major League Baseball hitting 400 feet opposite. I mean, you're talking about the best power hitters in the game that hit 400-foot opposite field homers. And right. Cruz is doing that as an 18-year-old at LSU. He's just massively impressive, man.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we just had the Kentucky series. It was good to get a couple, wins under our belt. Maybe they might be taking a step up. I don't know. What did you kind of take away from that series?
Well, they dug themselves a massive hole at 1-8. And I mean, obviously it's math. The only way to get out of that hole and get closer to 500 is to win more than you lose. So there's some people who might be disappointed with dropping the Sunday game, but if you're being realistic, when you're 1-8 in the conference and you're hitting 200 as a team in conference play, and you don't have a number 3 starter since Jaden Hill was injured and Labus had to move up, to go on the road and win a road conference series is no small accomplishment. I think sometimes context matters. So the fact that they were able to go on the road and win that series was just massive for their confidence, for the standings, for everything. I think the biggest takeaway, the bats got going on Friday, which was great to see. But I think for me, what we saw was on Friday, Landon Marceau gave you 7 1/3 and allowed 1 earned run. Didn't walk anybody, struck out 8. That's what you need from an ace. Because every Friday night in the SEC, you may not run up against Kumar Rocker every week, but you're going to run up against a Friday night guy in this league, and everybody's good. Everybody's got one. And you've got to have that guy that can put you in a position to win on Friday nights, especially now with Jaden Hill's injury, and you don't have AJ Labus going on Sunday, which was a great advantage that LSU had. So, yeah, man, Landon Marceau, I think, in a situation where you had to get your team off on the right foot, and he totally shoved on Friday. I thought that was just massive for this team.
Yeah, he's taking just another step up. I feel like every season that he's been here, he's just improved. And that's all you can really want from the Louisiana, Gatorade Player of the Year. But I mean, he has a sub-2 ERA in 50 innings, and majority of that's coming against, SEC play. I was at the Thursday night game against Vanderbilt, actually. And I put that loss on me because going into the 5th inning, it was 1-0. And I looked at my girlfriend and I was like, dude, this game's flying. We're 45 minutes. I'm like, this game's flying. We're getting great pitching on both sides. It's a fun game. And then Vanderbilt put up 9. So that's on me to Marceau. Yeah. His ERA should be a sub-1, but I'll take that one for the team.
I'd probably put that more on Mainieri for being a little delayed with the hook and some of the bullpen choices. But Paul is unconventional, man. He always has been. He's won a lot of games. I get that some of the things are head scratching, but then when it works, pulling a your shortstop in 09, DJ LeMahieu, and inserting a freshman in Austin Nola into the lineup, and you come up aces and you end up winning a national championship. It's hard to argue against.
Yeah, we can talk some more Mainieri later. But kind of going back to the Jaden Hill issues that we've been talking about probably won't see him again this year. So kind of going to the season, we knew we had 3 really good starters, kind of question marks afterwards. And that was kind of the strength of this team. A rotation like that, you say, these are the type of guys that can win in the postseason. These are the type of guys that can compete in the SEC tournament. And now you take away a potential top 5 pick in this draft, in this rotation, you leave a pretty decent hole. So who do you see kind of coming in and filling in that hole? Like, who do you want to see? I guess they went Blake Money the first game. Who do you think should take it?
Well, you don't have Jaden Hill. I mean, you don't have anyone that's going to fill that role, obviously. So I'll answer your question about game 3 in a second, but the biggest, I think, detriment, obviously, of losing Hill is not many teams have a game 3 starter who's thrown 100 career innings. It's just a rarity. I mean, that's why you see massive scores usually on Sundays in college baseball, because teams run out of pitching. When LSU had A.J. Levis as their Sunday guy, you're talking about a guy who's been here for 4 years, who's a legit, draftable prospect, and thrown 100+ innings. I mean, that gave LSU an advantage every game 3. Well, you've lost that advantage now with Levis moving up to game 2, and so it's left that hole in game 3. I was very surprised that. Well, let me rephrase. I was not surprised that Paul Mainieri went with Blake Money. Money pitched well against Vanderbilt. He obviously got Paul Mainieri's attention, and Paul tends to be a guy that rides the hot hand. And so he probably thought maybe Money had found something, and so he gave him that opportunity. I was surprised, however, that we did not see Will Helmers pitch at all this weekend against Kentucky. Yeah. Helmers has been a consistent guy for you, aside from starting the season at third base, which feels like a lifetime ago, as disastrous as that was. He's been as stoic and consistent a pitcher as LSU's had this year. And for Helmers not to touch the ball, to not throw a single pitch this weekend for me is inexcusable.
I agree.
I certainly would have thought that Helmers as your guy who's been your midweek guy, who's not only started, but started on the road as well. Not in SEC games, but it's one of the benefits of playing those road midweek games. You get guys opportunities to go feel something different, what it's like to be in a different ballpark, in a different batter's eye, a different dugout, different dressing room, the whole experience that you feel when you're on the road in conference. Why you go do that. And Helmers had that experience a couple times this year, which is why I'm a little surprised that we didn't see Helmers start game 3. And I'd like to see that this coming weekend against South Carolina. If the opportunity presents and you don't need Helmers out of the bullpen either of the first 2 days, I'd like to see him get the start in game 3.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Was it Garrett Edwards or was it Helmers that was the story came out that they're texting Mainieri every day saying, I want the ball?
That was Edwards.
That's what I thought. See, I want to give the ball to Edwards now.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants the ball, like I like that.
Well, clearly I think LSU's going to have it's a problem, but in some ways it's a good problem. Next year they're going to lose everybody. You're going to lose Marcel Hill-Levis. You're losing your entire rotation.
Yeah.
And
so you still think Hill enters the draft?
For sure. 100%. Because there's a
still
team
probably go first round.
I don't think there's, you never know, but right. Yeah, I do, because the way that guys have come back from the UCL now, sometimes they come back even better. If it were a shoulder injury, that's completely different. But the elbow, the Tommy John, we just see it so much now, and it's unfortunate. It sucks, and it's probably a 7-figure injury for Jaden Hill. I mean, he was maybe an 8-figure injury. He was projected to be a top 5, top 10 guy, and that's not likely to happen. But I still think he'll go somewhere round 1, and someone will give him a year to rehab it, and then they'll put him into their farm system. So you're going to lose your entire rotation. But you have Edwards, Helmers, Ty Floyd has shown you that he's capable of being a guy with stuff to pitch on the weekend.
Just inconsistent, but that comes with youth.
Yeah, it's also why it's also why I think guys like Helmers and Edwards are so impressive, because they found consistency. They found poise as freshmen in those situations. So, but Edwards, I think, because you brought up Edwards wanting the ball, I think Edwards has been so valuable at the back end of games, man. Like, game 2, after Floyd and Fontenot allowed Kentucky to rally, Edwards came in the 9th, slammed the door, man. I mean, that was a pressure situation, and 1, 2, 3 without blinking. I mean, I know he's got the moxie to be that guy in the 8th or the 9th inning. And so if you have the luxury of keeping him there, I'd keep him there this year.
Definitely. I mean, those guys are really hard to come by. I mean, pretty much since like Zach Hess's like freshman year or so, I feel like we really haven't had that guy to come in the 9th that you feel very confident in. I guess Fontenot when he's really on. But outside of that, it's been a while since we've had like the come in, 3 up, 3 down, let's go. Like 9th inning hits, like, hey, let's go take showers, like game's over.
Yeah. Fontenot has been that guy in his career. This year, it's been interesting. And this weekend, I really didn't like throwing him with a 7-run lead in game 1. And you saw trying to pitch him back-to-back days, his stuff just wasn't as sharp. It's such a different approach, man, when you're coming out of the bullpen and you're just going to be max effort. It's so hard to be effective on back-to-back days. So
definitely.
I mean, Fontenot was awesome on Friday when we saw him, but you saw him with a 7-run lead. That's the spot where, man, I'm like, why not give the ball to Vetmeyer? Why not give the ball to George? Give the ball to one of those guys with a big lead. Just throw it over the plate. I don't care if you give up a run or 2 runs there, or 4 or 5 runs. I mean, just throw it over the plate. Let them get themselves out. Let's save our best arms. Go win game 2 tomorrow.
Well, the silly part about throwing with a 7-run lead is, you still have 2 more games that series. And, if it's Sunday, he didn't pitch yet, you got a 7-run lead, it's okay. Let him go get his work in. But you still have 2 more games to worry about. I don't know. It feels weird. It feels like you're putting all your eggs into one game whenever you're 1-8 in conference play.
I do. Well, but that's the thing. Because you're 1-8 at that point, you have
to get the win.
I think you've got to get the win. Absolutely. But there's still some practicality, I think, that has to come into play where you go, all right, you're up 7. If it gets to 2, all right, then maybe you go get him hot and get him in there. But until that situation presents, I don't think you assume that it will. Now, then again, the next game I manage will be my first, and Paul Mainieri is a Hall of Famer. That's one, though, that I go, man, you probably could have maximized your staff more this weekend than you did.
Probably so. Kind of going back to Dylan Cruz, because why not, really?
Yeah.
Whenever you watch Dylan Cruz play, who's like the one guy he reminds you of? Because there's one guy in the majors he reminds me of like almost to a T.
So I had this conversation with Ryan Terrio on my show early in the season. And Terrio said Mike Trout. And I was like, come on, man. Like, wait, like, real. It's the best player in the game. People compare him to Mickey Mantle. He might be the greatest ever by the time he's done. He's like, I'm not saying that he is Mike Trout. He said, but when you look at a guy who's that big, with that kind of power, who's the best athlete and the fastest guy on your team, it makes some sense. I mean, he's probably, I would say Cruz is a center fielder at the next level. I don't know why he's not playing center field at LSU. He did on Sunday, but I think he should be LSU center fielder right now. But I don't get to fill out the lineup card. But he's a guy that hits for average, hits for power, can hit for power to all fields. He's a 5-tool guy. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. He's that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously still 18, so he's going to put on more muscle. He's going to probably grow a little bit more, so he might turn into like that Mike Trout body type. I actually had Mookie Betts, which kind of splitting hairs here. I mean, they have the same skill set, except Mookie Betts does it at 5'8", 180 instead of 6 foot, 200. Yeah, that's just kind of the only difference between the two.
Yeah. Either way, we just threw out the name of a couple of big league MVPs. So
the top 2 players in baseball over the last 6 years.
But it goes to show the conversation that people are having about Dylan Cruz, and rightfully so. I mean, when his day comes in 2 years, I mean, there's no way this kid should be playing college baseball right now. But it's another way that the college baseball has shifted, where guys are willing to say, okay, I'll go play college ball. I'm going to face really good pitching in the SEC. And instead of riding a bus for 3 years in the minors, I'll fly charter. I'll be the big man on campus. I'll play in front of 10,000 people. I'll have all the amenities that you'd ever want. Playing meaningful games instead of minor league games. Playing for a team concept instead of just for me. And then they fast track to the show. I mean, look at guys like Bregman did it, guys like Dansby Swanson. I mean, we've seen it where these guys will go, they'll get drafted, they'll play, rookie ball, and then in their first full season, sometime around the summer, they're getting their call up, and they never go back down. So you could ride a bus in the minor leagues for about 6 months, or you can do it for 3 years and play at LSU. So I kind of get to that point, I get it, but competitively, this kid should be playing professional baseball somewhere.
Yeah, he definitely strikes me as the Bryce Harper type that could have been called up by the time he was, 19, 20, like after just a couple years in the minors. But you know what the craziest part about him is? Like, he is so good that another freshman, Trey Morgan, really just doesn't get the love that he deserves.
Right.
He like plays like insane
Right.
defense, like Gold Glove type caliber defense. He's OPSing over 1,000, 330 like batting average. I feel like he's on base, 50% of the time. Kind of, what do you see? Like, what is the most impressive part of Trey Morgan's game?
That we talk about a first baseman defensively, which, man, I've been watching LSU baseball since I was a kid. Like, I remember the '91 national championship team. I don't ever remember talking about a first baseman's defense at LSU. I mean, going back to Johnny Telechia, who was the first baseman on the '91 team. If Furness was maybe the best career anybody's ever had at LSU, but Eddie Furness was a bopper. I mean, he was an amazing hitter. He wasn't known for his defense at first base. I mean, and you just run through the years of guys who were basically just dudes that just stand on the base and catch the ball.
Yeah.
The fact that Morgan is turns in web gems seemingly every game. It's almost maybe the best compliment I could pay Morgan is when he doesn't make the play, you're surprised. Like there was a ball, it was a throw-in error on Thompson game 3 in the Kentucky series, and a run scored because of it and allowed another runner to get the second, and would ultimately, that was that big 8-run, was the 8-run 7th or 8-run 7th.
Yeah.
And Morgan didn't pick it. There was a throwing error on Thompson, but I was almost surprised Morgan didn't pick it. That's probably the biggest compliment I could pay. But the other thing too is I didn't think we'd see power from Morgan. And I mean, he homered again on Sunday against Kentucky. His 2-run homer is kind of what got LSU back in the game at 5-3. But he's another one who's a special prospect who you're going to enjoy watching for 3 years. And when his day comes, he'll be a high draft pick, and he'll probably play Major League Baseball one day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fact that every time you tune into a broadcast and all you hear is, this is a shortstop playing first. This is a shortstop playing first.
Yeah.
Like, if he was a righty, he would be a shortstop.
Right.
I'm actually a Red Sox fan. So there's a account called Red Sox Stats. And this was during Jaden Hill's, I think it might have been his first game of the season. So the first game. And he tweeted out the clip, and it was like, Trey Morgan just had the best defensive. I don't know who this freshman is, but he just had the best defensive first inning ever. And he was catching balls over the shoulder, picking it. You saw that?
I saw it. Yeah, I did.
Just amazing. All right, so let's talk a little about this. This is my guy right here, Gavin Dugas. I need all the Gavin talk. What do you think on his season so far?
What's so interesting about Gavin Dugas is he almost wasn't a Tiger. He was playing, if I remember the story correctly, with Alden Cartwright, who's a friend of mine who pitched at LSU. I think Alden finished up maybe in 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And Alden coaches a lot of travel ball stuff now as well. And I remember him telling me, about Gavin, and he kind of lobbied for Gavin with the LSU coaching staff. And Gavin is an example of a guy who is kind of that old dirtbag grinder type mentality. And he reminds me a lot of guys from a bygone era of college baseball, where you'd get on campus, you'd get better and better. By the time you're in year 3 or 4, you were a dude. And he's grown into his body. He obviously hits for power, and he's a guy in the lineup that I think every opponent has to respect. And defensively, he's played a really respectable left field as well. You may not remember this name, but it kind of reminds me of Chad Cooley. Chad Cooley was a left fielder on the 1996 championship team, the Warren Morris team. And Chad was just a yoked guy, stocky. I mean, you look at him and think he was a power lifter, not a left fielder, but Chad could hit for power, and he played a really good left field. And he was just one of those guys, man, who had that sort of enforcer type mentality. I think every team needs that. I think, that's something that kind of, it felt like maybe the Jordan twins brought to LSU that LSU really hasn't had since they graduated. And I think Gavin can kind of be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. I actually played high school with him, so I've known him for a very long time. He was shortstop of the high school team. He went to LSU as a second baseman, then started kind of competed, started to get some at-bats, won the starting job. Then he tore, I think the UCL of this ligament right here, of this thumb.
His thumb, yeah.
And, missed 6 weeks or whatever, came back a little early to try and play against the Florida series, wasn't really healthy, didn't get right, struggled. Come into the next season last year, he was, struggling a little bit at the start. Then by the time COVID hit, his batting average was up to 286. And it's a guy who's, slow start, but he finally started to get that bats. He was finally healthy. And now we're seeing it this year. He had that extra year to work, and now he's just a stud. I mean, he's a 3-year-old hitter right now.
Yeah, he's been he's definitely been impressive to watch. And you pointed out, he was a guy whose batting average would start to climb last year. That's something that, like, I think you're seeing similarly right now with Cade Veloso.
Yes.
Veloso has 10 strikeouts on the season in 100 at bats, which is amazing when you think of a guy like, say, like Caden Travinski. I'm not trying to pick on him, but Travinski's got, I think, 19 strikeouts and 40 at bats. I mean, he's basically striking out 50% of his at bats. It's crazy. But the thing about Veloso is, on a team where LSU strikeout numbers have been higher than they've been any year under Mainieri, he's actually been putting the ball in play. He just hadn't had a lot to show for it. It was great to see him this weekend actually have success putting the ball in play and finding some grass. So I think if Veloso's bat keeps coming along, that's going to be a huge boost for this offense, man, because that's just, you can put him anywhere in the lineup. You can hit him in the 2-hole and he'll drive fastballs. You can put him in the middle of the lineup as an RBI guy. You can put him in the bottom third as a guy who get on base to turn over the order. He's a valuable piece of this lineup if he's going right and getting on base. So that was another big positive from the weekend against Kentucky.
Yeah, I feel like his breakout probably came like 2 weeks after it should have too, because he had like a week or two stretch when he started just crushing the ball and he just had nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And it's just baseball. Kind of give me 2 reasons. Well, I guess one reason each. Give me one reason why this team will make it to Omaha, and give me one reason why it won't. Obviously, one of those is a little bit harder than the other.
Well, they're not going to make it to Omaha. I think they'll be lucky to get into a regional. For me, I think this team's goal needs to be find a way to get into postseason play. Now, if you want the optimist view, in 2018, Mississippi State was 15-15. They were a 500 team in SEC play, and they rode a heater in postseason and went all the way to the championship series and lost to Oregon State. So it can happen. It's baseball. Shoot, man. I mean, Fresno State was literally the last team that got in the field and won a national championship in 2008. I mean, Coastal Carolina won a natty. I mean, it's baseball, man. It can happen. It's a crazy sport, and that's part of the fun of it. I mean, Georgia won a series against Vanderbilt.
Georgia scored 9 runs when Kumar Rockers pitches.
They hit 7 home runs on Thursday night when Kumar Rocker started. I mean, it's baseball. That's actually the thing that I love about baseball is every day is a new day, and it literally doesn't matter what you did the day before. You could have a 14-2 game and then a 1-0 pitcher. So it's just anyway. But I think for this team, realistically, the goal needs to be find a way to get to. I think it's going to take 14 SEC wins to get into regional play. The last time they missed regionals was 2011, and they were 13-17. Now their RPI was like right around 20, and they got screwed. They still should have been in, but that year they didn't make the SEC tournament, and because of that LSU team, the SEC changed the rules. And they expanded the tournament to make sure every team would get in. Then they expanded the league, of course. Now 12 teams get in, but I think with that being sort of the benchmark, if you can get to 14, if you can get to 14-16. Then I think you're in. I think realistically, you have to look at Arkansas and Ole Miss and say you're going to be lucky to get a game in those series. So if you can win one in each of those, that means you're going to have to win each of your remaining series to get to that number. So you got to win the series against South Carolina. You got to win series against Auburn, Alabama, and Texas A&M. And you can't get swept by Ole Miss and Arkansas. And if you do that, I think you're in regional play. And then once you're in the tournament, man, see if you can get hot. So that would be the optimist view, to see if you can find a way to get hot in postseason play and make a run. But realistically, I think this is a team that that just has a lot of growing to do. And if they make it into postseason play after a 1-8 conference start, that'd be a pretty hell of a nice climb out of that hole.
Definitely. I also think whenever you look at it, though, if they do make it to regionals, I don't think there's a team in the country that wants them in their regional. And I think if we can say we, but like if LSU can find a way to make it to regionals, kind of get hot and later in the year, maybe make a little bit of a run in the SEC tournament, if they can go win somebody's regional and give somebody a fight in the super regional, I think everybody like in Baton Rouge would be ecstatic for the growth of that team.
Not everybody, because I know LSU fans too well to know, man, if this team isn't going to Omaha, people are pissed off when the season ends because you lost, because ultimately the season ends with a loss. But the SEC tournament point is a good one, and the 2010 team was similar. Of course, they won the championship in 2009, and then 2010 really struggled, but they got hot in Hoover and won it. And they had an ace at the front of the rotation with Anthony Renato, and they got hot and won the whole thing. I mean, people joke and call it the Mainieri Invitational, but he puts a lot of emphasis on the SEC tournament. So that could very well be the thing that catapults LSU to make a run. I'd love to see it, man. I would love to. It's just May and June are so much more fun when LSU's playing baseball, man. It's just playing meaningful games. I'm hopeful this team can catch fire.
I definitely feel that. I mean, the talent's there. Like that's what's so like I keep waiting around, like hoping they flip a switch, like waiting for it to happen. Kind of go like this series. Like if they could have went out there and been a little bit more competitive against Vanderbilt, maybe I'd feel better. But at this point in the season, if you told me that they would, put up a fight in the regionals, I'd be fine with it. But kind of speaking to the Mainieri stuff you're talking about, do you think his days here are numbered, and do you think they should be?
So Mainieri's contract runs through 2024, and I think he's always sort of privately stated that that he wanted to coach through that contract. So that's kind of always, I think, been the target. He's, I think, personally been through a lot in the last couple of years that may change that. I think everyone knows that Paul is very, very close with his dad, who passed a few years ago. He's also very close to Tommy Lasorda, who passed this year. And those two things took a pretty heavy toll on Coach Mainieri. And then he also had that neck surgery that I know it's been written about. I don't know that many people really understand, but he was just in an incredible amount of pain. You'd see him in the dugout all the time, kind of doing this, moving his head. I mean, he had a vertebrae, an artificial vertebrae surgery. Like he had a vertebrae removed and like a prosthetic put in. I mean, he had a serious neck surgery. So I think part of it is there's a quality of life component there as well. So all that to say, I wouldn't be surprised if the way the season is going, if Mainieri decides to retire after this year. That wouldn't surprise me at all. It also wouldn't surprise me if he wants to keep coaching. The thing that I'll say to the other part of the question you asked, which is should he, and that's merit based, right? That's performance based. I think the expectation at LSU with fans has been College World Series, and not just College World Series, but go and win it. And LSU hasn't won it since 2009. Now they were, in my opinion, an Eric Walker injury away from winning it in 2017. Because if Eric Walker started game one of the championship series, Alex Lang didn't even get to pitch. I mean, your best pitcher didn't even get to throw in the championship series. And if you have Lang in game 3, Florida was out of pitching, you would have won that. You very likely would have won that series. And so the whole conversation is different. But the reality is it's what it is. They didn't win it. But my feeling is still that every year the coach's job is to have your team in a position to make a run. The reason we just talked about, Noah, like, the coach can't pitch. He can't hit. He can't, like, in a game. Is there anything Tim Corbin could have done differently to prevent Kumar Rocker from giving up 9 runs? Of course not. It's just like it's baseball. But what you should do as a coach is have assembled a roster that is talented and veteran enough to, if you're at LSU, to host a regional every year and to be in contention to be a national seed. Because if you are, then your trip to Omaha runs through the box. That should be the expectation every year. And they did that in 2017. They did not do that in 2018. they hosted a regional in 2019, and they got a super regional just because of upsets when they hosted Florida State and they lost. And then last year, I don't think that team was on target to make a run either. But you never know. It's a baseball thing. So now you look at this season, that's 4 consecutive years. It's 4 consecutive years where you've fallen short of what your baseline expectation would be. And that's where merit-based, questions come into play legitimately. I'm not a fire the coach guy, and I think that too many LSU fans don't give Paul Mainieri enough credit for having won a championship, for being one of only 2 programs ever to be a national seed 6 consecutive years. The consistency with which he has won, it has earned him Hall of Fame inductions. He's an incredible coach, but everybody's run comes to an end, and Paul's is certainly nearer the end than the start. And maybe this is it. Maybe this is the point where if this thing doesn't get back on track, where you look and say, it's time. But I do think, as one addendum to that, I think LSU fans who always want to fire the coach, I think you'll be very surprised when LSU hasn't had a higher baseball coach in a long time. When that day comes, how difficult they're going to find it is to attract an elite level coach. I mean, it's LSU. It's always going to be attractive. But if you think you're getting Tim Corbin or Kevin O'Sullivan or guys that have won championships, that's not happening. So sometimes I would caution you to be careful what you wish for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very easy to say, hey, fire this guy. But then the question becomes, okay, well, who are you hiring? Who is going to replace this guy?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm split. Like, obviously, like, Mainieri pulls in a lot of talent. It feels like it feels like it's time almost for a shakeup. But as you said, like, who's taking his place? If Cannizzaro is still here, then, I'm go with Cannizzaro. Like, that's a guy Alex Bregman was very high on. When he left from Mississippi State, obviously we see what he did for State's program until all that stuff happened. But right. Unless they might still have Cannizzaro on the radar, he's not really doing anything right now.
There's no shot. I mean, in
not with LSU, the waters they're in.
Right. In an LSU athletic culture right now, where you've got Title IX investigations going on, and the U.S. Department of Education is investigating, and you've got coaches being subpoenaed to court hearings. Like, there was no way to bring in a coach who had an inappropriate relationship with a student at Mississippi State. Like that, I will say, I don't like speaking in absolutes. I'm telling you, there was no chance they hire Andy Cannizzaro.
Yeah, I mean, they already have their one coach with Will Wade. They already have their one controversial coach. We don't need a second one. Yeah. All right, kind of wrapping up here. Don't want to keep you too long. All right, one final question to ask all my guests. If you can go back in time and live through one moment in sports history, what would it be?
Oh, that's so hard. I mean,
it's usually everyone's first answer.
I have an answer to a question I thought you were going to ask, which is, if you could see one athlete you never got to see, who would it be? And it's Pete Maravich. For me, that's easy. It's the guy I've heard about my whole life. I've seen black and white clips of. I've seen all the photos, the floppy socks, the hair, just the magician with the basketball. Like, Maravich is the one guy that I never got to see play, that if you say you could watch anybody in history play, who would it be? It would be Pete Maravich. That's easy. One moment, man, I feel like it's the reason it's so hard for me to answer this is because I feel like, as a sports fan, I've been so fortunate to see greatest moments. Like, I've seen LSU win 3 football national championships. I've been to all of them. I've been to Omaha when LSU won a baseball national championship in 2000. Watch the Saints win a Super Bowl. Jesus, that's a miracle for a kid who grew up in New Orleans and watched one of the worst franchises in the history of the sport actually turn around and win a Super Bowl. So when you think about it, like, the greatest moments as a fan that I'd want to see, I got to see. So you'd have to just go like total off the wall throwback, something like, I don't know, Miracle on Ice or something like that, where it's a great historic event that stood the test of time, that would be cool to see. But I'd rather answer it the way the one athlete I want to see, which is Maravich.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, you could just pick a random Pete Maravich game and go see.
Yeah,
that's what one guy said. I actually had on. He was it was talking about Jim Brown, though. He said, I want to go back in time, just go watch a Jim Brown, like 150-yard, 2-touchdown game. But anyways, Matt, I'm gonna wrap up here. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate the time, and best of luck.
My